Good afternoon. Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, first of all, I'd like to express my gratitude for having me back here in Bratislava. I think this is actually the fourth time I'm here in the past year, so it's really great to be getting increasingly involved with your ecosystem and wonderful city. My name is Walter Pasquarelli. I've spent my entire career working on AI policy, first as part of a smaller consultancy, then I used to cover AI strategy at The Economist, now working with different kinds of stakeholders and governments, the University of Cambridge, on helping governments and organizations adopting AI responsibly. When we talk about artificial intelligence, I think one of the main things that I realized, and probably each one of you has sort of like perceived in the past year, has been sort of like this entrance of this new technology that everyone now keeps talking about. And I think if I listen to, for example, Maria earlier or some of the comments that were made, it's the fact that everyone's like, what can we imagine when we think about AI? What are the possibilities? Are we thinking about this sort of like inevitable utopia or dystopia that is coming? How can we bring it into our organization? Mastering this technology and knowing how to conduct business in this generative age is what I would like to have a look at with you today. Okay, wrong button. Cool. Right, so this is me. I can't look at this picture here, but anyway, this is my QR code to my profile, so we can stay in touch in case you want to continue the conversation. But basically, I want to first of all ground this conversation in really a foundational understanding of the technology. Typically, when we talk about AI, we're actually looking at a technology that isn't really new. It started out in the 1950s, famously when Alan Turing first asked the question, can machines think? And particularly in the past year, we have seen the technology really coming increasingly onto our social and digital spaces through images like this. Now, just a very quick question. Who of you thinks that the image on the left is the real one? Please raise your hand. One person, two people, three, four. Who of you thinks that the person on the right is the real one? Please raise your hand. Who of you is unsure? Wonderful. It's the person on the right. This is just one of the images that I think really shows us the capabilities that these new generative technologies can actually bring nowadays. And it brings also like sort of a more foundational, philosophical conversation as well about defining artificial intelligence. Now, typically when we talk about AI, there's sort of a number of terms that I see floating around business lingo. The first one is, of course, AI, which is sort of like the umbrella term of the technology. Then there's machine learning, which was kind of a buzzword in 2015 and 16, which refers primarily to machines being able to improve performance over time through experience. And then we have sort of this new branch, which started becoming sort of like discussed all over business and policy lingo, which is generative AI, which is essentially a branch of AI that is able to generate outputs, mediatic outputs, through, for example, text, through images, through videos. Let's have a closer look. Right, so one thing to understand when we talk about artificial intelligence and sort of like the newest developments that have happened in the past year is that perhaps in the last years, typically we would have one specific tool to solve one specific task. If you're a business owner and you want to understand who your customers are, you might use one model to understand how old they are, where they're coming from, potentially their gender, their interests, one specific tool for one specific application. But something has happened over the past years, and that's that primarily like some institutes in the west coast of the United States, but also in China and other regions of the world, started asking themselves, what if we just all of a sudden, instead of using specific small data sets, we scale the size of these models? What if now we use potentially all the data that we can find on the openly available internet and pass it through models and trading with as much computing power of a nation? What happened is that artificial intelligence was basically turned almost upside down. So instead of having one small tool that can solve one specific task, we now have these so-called foundation models that can solve multiple tasks at once. Think of one tool to write marketing copy, one tool to create images, one tool to create a rap song. This has led to what I call the foundation model economy, which is basically companies using these foundation models to build essentially additional layers of innovation on top of it. You might be a business owner that uses a foundation model such as GPT or Gemini or any of these emerging ones and includes it into their business to conduct data analysis. We're going to look into this just a little bit closer in just a second. This is just to show you the amount of investment interest that has occurred in the past year. So between Q4 of 2022 and Q1 of 2023, there has been a 2,040% increase in investment reports. So this is just to show you the amount of interest that different kinds of VCs and investors, but also like business owners see in the technology. There's a lot of hype, just to be aware of it. But nonetheless, it shows that the economy is really going into one specific kind of direction. Right, let's look at the capabilities of these models. First of all, when we talk about generative AI, there's so-called text-to-text tools. Text-to-text tools, think of, for example, the usual ChatGPT. The interface where you can ask it a question. Here I said, tell me a story, and it wrote me a beautiful story. But you could also use it for conducting more complex tasks, such as, for example, data analysis. So we can integrate these tools into our Excel sheets, and if I'm not someone who knows how to conduct, say, data manipulation or other kinds of techniques, I could basically ask it, how many bottles did we sell last year? Or how many customers do we think are going to buy our products next year? So it's basically a seamless way of integrating. Another application which is quite interesting, specifically, well, this is not skipping, specifically in the field of marketing, is then image generation. So that means that instead of having a designer or a photographer that basically we need to pay, we can essentially use some of these tools to generate images from scratch. For the avoidance of doubt, these are not actual images taken from Google. These were generated from scratch. So this is Will Smith, Emma Watson. These are not actual photographs that are taken. These were generated from an AI tool. The image there of the Pope wearing a Balenciaga jacket counts as the first instance of an image that went viral and that was largely assumed to be real. So the papal office had to issue a tweet just to clarify, no, this is not Pope Francis wearing a Balenciaga jacket. And then there's another area which I think is particularly interesting, which is text to video. And text to video, there has been a number of tools that have been published just in the past couple of weeks. One is called Sora from OpenAI. Another one is Harper AI. And these are essentially softwares that can generate large sequences of videos. Could we just play this video here, please? Just go on YouTube.
Cyborgs and humans united in purpose, bound by the allure of the unknown, as they embark on an unforgettable expedition to unveil the secrets of the all-seeing eye in the Finnish snowy forest. As they brave the frozen expanse, they encounter the wonders and challenges of this untamed land, where the whispers of legends seem to echo through the crisp
Great,
air.
we can stop the video here, thank you. Okay, so who of you recognize the actors? Who of you recognize the landscape? Perfect, that's exactly what I was looking for. This video here is again generated entirely by artificial intelligence. And it was produced on a laptop like the one that you and I have, and I should say this video is almost 1 year old. So there is much more realistic examples of AI-generated outputs that look like you can barely recognize them. And you can just imagine the implications this has for entire industries such as Hollywood, where you see actors and screenwriters going on strike due to fears of being automated and replaced, but also on political elections. Particularly this year, where there's 68 elections taking place and almost half the world going to the ballots, you can imagine the implications that this might have on what we perceive to be real or not. Can we exit this video? I just need to go to the next slide. Thank you. We need to talk as well about the future, possibly. Okay. Oh, perfect. So if we talk about, one of the questions that I get asked most from like business executives is like, based on your insights and the conversations that you're having with some of the foundation model firms and sort of some of the technology firms on the US West Coast, where do you think is the technology heading? And I don't have a crystal ball, and I'm always very careful with making predictions, but there is one pattern that I think is quite interesting, and that's the future of AI agents. Typically, progress in AI has been about developing models that have been more complicated, more complex, can make better calculations in a faster way, but we cannot reduce progress in AI only to intelligence in absolute terms, but more and more we will see it as well in terms of the way that we communicate with these tools. So we see an industry right now of different kinds of hardware and tools which try to integrate AI devices. Think of Siri or Alexa, but just in a very smart way, essentially. A tool that can book your next train ticket, a tool that can manage your household in a way that is proactive and is done based on your needs. Right. There is always an elephant in the room when we talk about artificial intelligence, and that's the question, am I going to lose my job to a robot? That's sort of something that has been discussed extensively on the media, that makes perfect political firepower, and that is something that justifiably worries people. Now, most of the evidence that we have is that artificial intelligence, as a matter of fact, creates more jobs than it actually takes away. Augmentation instead of automation. This is, for example, a chart from a study produced by Goldman Sachs, which shows here the light blue bar. These were the jobs that existed before 1940. And the dark blue bar are essentially jobs that have been produced since the inventions of new technology. So we can see that old jobs fall away, new ones are being created. That's just the course of the economy, and that makes quite a bit of sense. There is much less people who use horses and cows nowadays. People usually use machines and other kinds of software. So it's kind of self-evident. But nonetheless, some of the fear and the scaring about sort of like AI coming and taking the job still remains. This is, I think, the best study that I found out there, which is produced by the International Labor Organization, that used to look specifically at the exposure of tasks and jobs to artificial intelligence. This is, for example, it shows, well, who are the people or the tasks or the jobs that are at highest risk of automation. Clerical support workers are at number 1, but even they have a task exposure of just a medium exposure of 58% and a high exposure to 24%. The professionals and managers, they just have a task exposure of about 13%. So if anything, one of the implications that we can draw from it is that, yes, there might be some tasks or some sections of tasks that will be automated, but as a matter of fact, this might mean that we will become more efficient, that there will be probably a little bit more competition, but the benefits, I think, from what we can see so far are net positive. This is my favorite study. And that's because it's a study produced by 2 scientists at MIT that looked at the impact of using these tools on how people perceive their jobs. So specifically here, this study by Shacknoy and Whitney Zhang found out that using tools such as ChatGPT, which is a pretty basic tool, actually increases job satisfaction. Because basically, I don't need to do tasks that are repetitive and that I don't enjoy doing that much, but I can effectively give it to some of these tools and robots, machines, not robots, and focus on tasks that add more value, that are more useful, that allow me to use creative thinking and strategic approaches. Right, so the benefits of using some of these AI tools in businesses are effectively, I like summarizing them in 3 areas. The first one is efficiency gains, so we become faster at doing something. I don't have to summarize a text myself anymore. I have a tool that does it for me, and then I do just edit it later on. The second one is scale, so we can become much faster. For business owners, especially like young entrepreneurs and startups, having some of these sort of tools, what a lot of business people report is to say it's like having an additional intern. So it's having an additional 1 or 2 people that might just be at the beginning of their career, but they can help me do some tasks and scale more effectively without hiring people. And the third element is then that we have a tool for creative sparring. And that means that sometimes I might have an idea, and I'm not quite sure what to think about it, and I can ask some of these tools, what do you think about it? Have I missed anything? Keep in mind, ChatGPT or Bard or Claude are still intellectually toddlers, if we want, but they can still help you with some insights and some input of some things that maybe you might have missed. Here is, for example, a case study. There's a US law firm that uses some of these tools for scanning NDAs. So instead of having to look and read manually hundreds of documents that basically pass it through some of these foundation models, it does the analysis for them and it looks at all the patterns. Relatively straightforward task, always requires a human to review it just in case, always. But it's something that can be, through these new foundation models, can actually be automated relatively safely and relatively quickly. Another example is, for example, a firm called Killy, and this is an example of scale. And what they do is that they have a chatbot that they integrated into online shops that basically allows customers to ask questions. Think, for example, you're on Amazon, you want to buy a new, a bicycle, and you can ask it on the online shop some questions, but hey, how resistant are these bicycles' tires? Is this bicycle suitable for going on a trip in nature? So it's basically allows to ask additional questions without having necessarily to call the shop itself, but while being there on the shop. And that increases typically conversion rates and satisfaction rates for customers as well. And then there's another case that I think is quite interesting, which is a company called Twilio that basically have a tool for information and knowledge management. So some of you might remember you join a new firm, it's a big company, you don't know where to find documents. Where can I apply for holiday, for example? Who is responsible for this particular process? Who should I ask if I need to apply for sick leave? These models basically summarize the information, and you could ask them by a chatbot very simply without having to ask 5 different people and having to navigate the bureaucracy of an organization that you work with. So what it does is that it makes life easier, put simply, in a large organization. There are a number of strategic implications, I think, for the people that you will seek to hire in some of these new roles in your businesses. The first thing is that there's probably a little bit of a shift in job roles. Some of the clients that I advise on when they integrate these tools, the first thing they say is that, well, we need actually less manual workers, but we actually focus more on roles that require more human judgment or strategic thinking. Basically things that we cannot automate away. The second thing is that there is a demand for new skills, and that's, for example, I might be someone who is a lawyer, and I have insights about laws and regulations, but there might be also a necessity to understand technologies, to use them, and to become faster. Thirdly, there's an impact on education and training, and I think that's, I work closely with the University of Cambridge. I'm an affiliated researcher there, and it's a big topic right now there. How should we train people? Technically, people can write any essay or any blog with any of these tools, but as a matter of fact, it doesn't mean that these essays or blogs are good. But how can we use them to become more efficient and better? Think of it when the internet came out and people then had access to all this knowledge. Some might did plagiarism and other things. So we have to teach people how to use them responsibly in a way that still stimulates their intellectual thinking. And then there's, of course, the organizational and business model change, which I think is quite important, but probably the slowest of these processes, which means that for companies, it has direct implications for how they recruit, for how they award promotions, for what it means to reaching targets, even for power structures themselves and the hierarchies within an organization. Right, so let's look quickly at what I call the art of the possible, and I don't want to spend too much time on this, but there is effectively a couple of things that I think are important when we talk about using AI in an organization. There's what I call the building blocks of an AI-ready firm. The first thing is an alignment with the business strategy. So if you're a company, I would advise you against just going, we want AI, because everyone's talking about AI, so we need it as well. That's not a very promising strategy for using this technology. Start with your business strategy. So start asking yourself, how can I use this technology to reach my business goals that I already have set in mind? Your AI strategy is your business strategy, and that's what effectively you need it for. The two resources that I think are scarcest and where I see most organizations fail are then the data. That means having your data in order, data about your customers, basically your data infrastructure within an organization cleaned up and ready to use. And the second thing then is talent. So talent is one of the scarcest resources simply because people with AI skills are very much in demand, and providing the right kinds of culture and work environment is from all the research that we have done crucial for keeping them in. And then there's other things such as infrastructure, which includes having the right policies so that your business keeps developing and using AI in a way that is responsible and takes into consideration issues such as ethics and biases and so on. Let's look at specific methodologies. This is going to sound very technical. I promise you it's not. I'm not a computer scientist myself, so don't be afraid. This is going to be accessible. The first thing that I want to say is that large language models, or such as these tools like ChatGPT, they don't store facts, okay? So they're not basically tools that store all the amount of knowledge that are in the world, but they basically just store probabilities. They try and predict the next word in the sentence. When it comes to bringing AI into your company, there's a few methodologies here. The first one is prompt engineering. Prompt engineering, who of you has heard the term prompt engineering? Please raise your hand. Okay, so it's a few. Great. Prompt engineering effectively relates to your ability to communicate with a generative AI tool. It's your ability to ask it questions when you talk to ChatGPT and you say, write a marketing copy for me. It's very straightforward. It's very simple. It doesn't require a coding ability, so it's great for creating wider accessibility in an organization. But it has the problem that because these models are so broad, there's a real risk of either generative AI tools just making things up. They always want to give you an answer, so they hallucinate, as we say. They just invent things. I asked it a year ago to review my CV, and I looked like a different person. And I asked it what happened. They're like, oh, I just made it all up. And that's a real risk. And the other thing is that the answers are typically average. So we're talking again about statistics. So as a matter of fact, the answers you get are like statistical averages. And there's also some risks there. Talking about making things up, this was the case of a lawyer that basically tried to use ChatGPT for doing his legal research. ChatGPT just invented a bunch of legal cases. The lawyer ended in front of a court himself. So it's real. I'm not making this up. This is actually what happened in New York. So the risks are real. Be mindful of them. Another methodology that is getting quite a lot of traction right now, especially among larger companies, is something called embedding, or which is called retrieval augmented generation. Sounds awfully complex. It's not that complicated, I promise. Basically, it means you use a foundation model, a large one, and you add some of your own data to it. So think of using GPT, and you add a data set about your organization, own organization of it. Data about your customers, data about your transactions. What that means is that you ask then GPT to make decisions and calculations based on the data that you provided. So it allows you to be more precise. It allows you to make decisions more in context. And that has a few advantages in the sense that you can also create references and ask it, where did you come up with this answer? Did it just fall from the sky, or where did you come up with it? So it's more specific, and it's finding a lot of traction right now within larger corporations. Embedding, or RAG, they call it. So keep your, watch the space. This is getting a lot of traction right now. Morgan Stanley is using this. So what they're doing is that they're passing 100,000 investment documents into some of these models. And then their financial advisors can use these tools through embedding, or RAG that we just discussed, to create better investment reports by using insights of investment reports that they already generated in the past. They're not making investment recommendations with ChatGPT, I should say. And don't shape your investment portfolio with AI. I would like to just stress at this stage. But it can be helpful for, again, like having this creative sparring elements and getting more insights in. Now, a word of caution. That's something that I think needs to be said anytime we talk about integrating AI within your organization. There's a few real risks that AI is bringing, and I think we saw these being discussed in the previous panel already, which are important to keep in mind, because I can just tell you, 4 weeks ago, I received a call at 3 a.m. from a client based in Hong Kong that their client, a bank, had lost $20 million because of a scam of AI, because of a deepfake. This is an example of something that can happen. Can we just play this video very quickly? Oh.
I've had an accident and
on the line. Didn't end up being held hostage.
Skipping forward. I think it's 117 if I'm correct. Yes, play.
As he's now seeing insurance claims for this kind of fraud, showed us just how easy it is.
we're going to try and find some audio samples of you.
He pulled videos from my social media and uploaded clips to one of a growing number of voice cloning programs.
So it's literally a matter of dragging and dropping audio clips into this program.
That's it.
Then came typing what to say, and with the click of a button,
I already tried to call the bureau. It was weird no one answered. Sounds pretty good.
but could I fool a colleague with it?
Hello? Are you crazy busy? I forgot my corporate card.
Oh no.
Can I borrow yours real quick? I just need to pay for a few things. I'll get the receipts.
It wasn't perfect. There were delays, and some sentences sounded more genuine than others, but
I gotta run out and get my wallet.
it worked.
Thank you so much. Call you in a bit.
My colleague
thank you.
later
We can stop the video. So what happened here is that someone used a voice snippet of someone to recreate their voice and scam their colleague for $100. Very easily done, takes probably less than 2 minutes with any tool that you can find online. But that's creating real issues. And this bank in Hong Kong that I was just talking about lost $20 million because someone recreated the voice of their CFO and basically said, make a big transfer. So it happens, it's real. The key thing to tackling these are a number of technological solutions that I think they're too many to discuss right now, but the main thing is the education of employees and the awareness of it. A deepfake itself, this is a deepfake, for example, a deepfake itself is not harmful. The way we react to them is. So just a voice clone like that is not going to do anything, but if you react in the wrong way, that is. So training and awareness programs are the key thing for protection. And there's a number of ways that people try and tackle these. A lot of folks are talking about detection tools, wildly inaccurate. I think they're wildly unreliable. They have usually sort of a 20% accuracy. That was one from OpenAI. Similar thing for image and video. Typically, they don't seem to be really effective in tackling these tools. But education and awareness campaigns, as well as sort of other tools which are slightly more comprehensive to discuss right now, are probably the way forward. The other thing is privacy and bias, and I just want to say at this stage here, for the avoidance of doubt, do not put confidential client information into ChatGPT. There is a risk that these models leak. There is a risk that next time that this model is being trained, it might share some of this information with someone else. So make sure that if you do something that is slightly more sensitive, you deactivate the chat history and training button over there. Another issue is machine bias. So this was a case where an AI tool was asked to basically judge who would be at the highest risk of creating a crime. This was someone who had created multiple felonies on the left, and this was someone who I think had actually stolen a bicycle, but the AI tool give her a higher score of risk because of his color of his skin. The key thing here is that we go into auditing these tools, that we increase the transparency, that we know why these tools make specific kinds of decisions, and that we understand that the data that we use needs to be free of any kinds of bias and any kinds of issues. It is important to understand as well that, as I try to allude multiple times during this conversation, is we cannot just ask a tool like ChatGPT or Bard or Gemini or whichever you wanted to just make a decision and we just go with it. But the key thing is to always keep a human in the loop. Always ensure that any decisions that is made by some of these models is ultimately reviewed by one of you guys, because you ultimately, first of all, have the accountability, you know your organization best, and you should be the one who carries this responsibility when we actually implement AI into our organizations. There are a couple of final steps that I would like to give to you on the way, and that's just sort of to sum up some of the experiences that I've seen from some of the clients that I've worked with, including governments, including large corporates. When we talk about using artificial intelligence, the first thing that I really want to emphasize to all of you is demystify it. Don't look at AI like the Terminator or like a silver bullet or something that is from sci-fi. It's ultimately statistics with computing power, and it's very powerful, it's very promising, it's doing amazing things, but make sure that you understand it for what it is. Step number 2, when you think about how it can benefit your business, start with your business strategy. So start understanding what are the use cases where AI can help me. Throwing a neural network or throwing an AI tool at your organization is not going to increase your revenue. Understanding the use cases and areas of applications precisely will make a major advantage to your company. Step number 3, review your capabilities and constraints. Start with your data. Do you have your data in order? Do you have people that know how to use these tools? Do I have the right kinds of talent? Step number 4, don't just create a massive project in AI and you said, oh, AI transformation and we're going to start from tomorrow onwards and our organization is an AI firm now. Try a smaller pilot first, and once you have created that smaller pilot and you create a first success story, that allows you to scale it up, build a success story, and secure the buy-in from your executives and from your major shareholders. So start small, but start and then scale it up. And the final thing is weave in ethics and trust just from the start. Ensure that any application of artificial intelligence will be done responsibly, will keep in mind the people that you serve, and doesn't discriminate anyone along the way. This is important for ethical reasons, because research shows that consumers care about the use of AI that is responsible, but also because of regulation that is coming in. So you don't have much choice in this one, but ensure that your tools are used responsibly and in a way that aligns with regulation and ethical standards. Ultimately, AI is a journey, and trying out AI tools over time requires and means that there might be successes and some failures, and it means that, as a matter of fact, we can try to implement these tools gradually, and that will help us ultimately make sure that these technologies will be a business success. So thank you very much for listening. I'm here for any questions. I think we have 10 more minutes. This is a QR code through which you will be able to, again, be in touch with me. But I would like to thank you very much for welcoming me to beautiful Bratislava again, and thank you for listening.
Thank you very much. We got some. There are a few questions.
Right. So the first question, are there already AI tools which verify audio and video content on whether they're being genuine, meaning like organic, if we want, or being AI generated? There's a huge market that is emerging on that. There's a lot of hype around sort of like detection tools, as they call them. From the evidence that we're gathering, that we're seeing so far, though, these tools are wildly unreliable. And there's a reason for that, because the same technology that we use to generate audio or video synthetically is the same technology that we use to detect them. So a very good detector is also a very good creator of fake images and fake audio. So to give you an example, OpenAI had developed their own tool for developing text that was AI generated, and they themselves put it down because it had an accuracy rate of only 26%. Similarly, there was a challenge that I think was made by Meta, back then Facebook, for detecting deepfakes. That was in 2019, and the winner of that challenge had an accuracy rate of only 58%. So we see that detection tools are not really an option. The way to tackle sort of an understanding whether something is AI generated or not is by understanding the provenance of these tools. So we can, for example, integrate what they called embedded cryptographic hashes, which basically means when I take a photograph through my phone, the photo gets a hash that says this photo has been taken here by this person at this time in this place, and whenever a change is made to that photo, is being recorded cryptographically. And that way we know what has happened to that image, whether it has been changed, whether it has received any additional work, and so on and so forth. And then the final thing as well are the educational campaigns. And I just want to say it again, because I think it's so important. A deep fake or a fake AI image itself is not harmful. The way we react to them is. So it's a matter of understanding when we see something that looks crazy online, we need to educate our employees and our workers that maybe we need to question these images. Right, I think there's a second question as well. Yes, so how do we think AI training will progress in the next couple of years? It looks like large language models hit a wall. So for those of you, who of you is familiar with large language models? Could you raise your hand? Okay, so a majority of people. For those of you who are not familiar with them, typically, in the past couple of years, what we saw with these large language models, the model behind ChatGPT, or some of these tools that you all know, is that the key term that defined them was scale or size. So people said, let's make them bigger and bigger and bigger. Let's use more data, more computing power, and that way they become smarter and smarter and smarter. There's a few issues there. The first one is that, as Maria earlier implied, is the fact that it has a big environmental footprint. So the bigger these models are, the bigger the CO2 emissions. So that's an issue. But there's also a matter of fact that it's also, the bigger they are, the harder it is to use them because it's going to be more and more difficult to process them. Will these models become simply larger over time, or will we find new techniques? From what we've seen is that it's kind of going in both directions. So I see some of the large organizations that are actually trying to build bigger and bigger models, particularly some of the European AI firms. But then there's, for example, I think just 2 weeks ago, DeepMind published their own tool based on Gemini, and I forgot the name, I'm embarrassed to say. But that was, for example, a smaller language model that people will be able to use offline. So the future is not necessarily larger, but the future is, as I said earlier, tools that are easier to use and more interactive. So we can see some of these models being made smaller, and then we can use offline, and that we can use on our phones, and we can use on some of these hardware devices. So I think this is where I think we'll see a lot of the activity of AI. There's going to be a lot more tools that are interactive, a lot more tools that are integrated within our AirPods or within some other hardware devices. I think this is where a lot of the industry is going right now, in addition to more intelligent AI systems.
Okay, another question. Let me see. If we talk about AI tools, which one is best?
Yeah, let me see. Shall we start? Oh, this is one of my favorite questions. Will we be going to movie theaters to watch movies with actors that never existed? That's certainly a credible scenario, but I think there's two things I would distinguish there. I mean, if we're looking at a 20 to 30-year timeline, there's two different types of actors. Ones are basically actors that people don't know. So think about the crowds in movies, thousands of people. These might be entirely synthetically generated. But with actors that are well known, there's going to be more and more something that is called the licensing of their appearance. So I was speaking a few weeks ago to the director of SAG-AFTRA, which is basically the associations of actors and artists in Hollywood. And the concern there is that if I'm, for example, Tom Hanks or Tom Cruise or Ryan Gosling or Margot Robbie, someone very well known, I can license out my face to an AI tool, and then I can basically be put in movies without actually performing. That works if you're a famous actor, because you can charge a lot of money for that, because you're very well known. It doesn't work very well if you're not a well-known actor. So there could be a real disparity between these kinds of artists there. Same thing for music, by the way. So there's a lot that is happening in that field, a lot of protest as well. I do think it's inevitable, simply because of the economies behind it. I think it's going to be very difficult for unknown actors to sort of stay present in that moment. But it could also be that there's, for example, actors created that don't really exist. So right now, what's becoming very big on Instagram, there was a profile of someone, and I forgot the name, I shall circulate it later on, but of an influencer that accrued millions of followers in a few weeks, and she doesn't exist. And there were cases of footballers messaging her, and like, hey, do you want to meet up? And that's becoming a real thing as well. Right, so hope this answers your question, sort of. Okay.
There is something new with the Samsung phones. What do you think about AI in Samsung phones? It's a step forward, or?
Yeah, I don't know specifically how Samsung integrated AI. I know that there's a lot of hardware companies that are bringing in AI systems into their phones. Two things on that. Generally speaking, yes, I mean, every phone right now is sort of trying to integrate some of these AI tools into their hardware. And I think that's overall a positive step. I don't know whether one system is better than the other. I probably shouldn't comment on that. There is an argument that is increasingly being made that smartphones themselves are getting outdated, simply because they cannot... they're not the best way anymore to sort of like use AI. Smartphones are very good when it comes to sort of like content and accessing the internet, but when it comes to AI, I think there's some firms that are trying to challenge the smartphone itself, but instead developing smart glasses instead of using like mobile phones as a way of accessing AI. So ultimately, hardware devices are a vehicle for bringing the most powerful technologies to our palms and to our hands. Are smartphones the best way to bring AI into our hands? Maybe. So I think it's a step forward, as a matter of fact, but I don't think this is sort of like the end game of AI integration in hardware.
And today we get one section here. It's called creative industry. So there is a question, do you think AI will replace artists?
Oh, God. Usually when it comes to the creative industries, I work with some clients in the creative industries, and we've done sort of like a landscape analysis of the creative industries. There is effectively three layers that we see there, which are divided by pricing and AI and human involvement. So if let's take, for example, art or design. That's sort of a very straightforward example. I think in the next few years, if we look at our digital and social media spaces, there's going to be an explosion of AI-generated art. Because it's basically anyone can go to any of these tools and say, create this or create that, create a landscape of this. It doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be very good. So that's what I called AI fast art or cheap art, like fast food, but basically from AI generated output. So lots of AI content flooding our digital spaces. I think that's going to be a fact. On top of that, there's then, if we look at creative industries and particularly design, there's going to be hybrid models between human and AI-generated content. And that can mean that, for example, a firm, let's take Pepsi or Coca-Cola, they might hire a designer to produce their new campaign, and that designer can be much faster because they can use AI tools that help them design something, but still having that human touch, that human intuition about what is actually needed to make a design campaign that is appealing. And that's sort of like on the middle price range where I can see it's sort of like the middle ground. Ultimately, I think that fully human-created designs and paintings or art, sort of the top of the bell curve, are going to become increasingly rare. A little bit like Italian leather, if we want, so sort of some of these industries which are very high-end, or like paintings, right? I mean, there are very few painters nowadays anymore. And simply because it's more expensive, because there's other kinds of economic logics that means that you can create the same thing in a cheaper way. So majority of content going to be entirely AI-generated. Designers and humans working together will, I think, become sort of mostly the norm. And then there's sort of a top layer of humans creating designs entirely by themselves, which I think is going to become increasingly economically unviable.
I think the last question, interesting question about something with the law and copyrights. What about copyrights and generative AI? Who will be a holder of a license?
So there's a lot of discussion going on right now because there's been some newspapers that have sued some tech firms because of the use of, say, some articles into their foundation model tools in the United States, without mentioning, well, actually it's public. So it basically, some newspapers are suing some of the large AI firms because they're using some of their articles without paying for it. Right now, there's been a couple of court cases. I think one was in the US District of Columbia Court, which said that basically anything that you generate through AI, take an image or an audio file or a video, does not have copyright protection unless there is sufficient human involvement. What sufficient human involvement means is something that will have to be defined through more court cases and so on and so forth. So there's still something that is a bit murky, if we want. As far as sort of some of these big lawsuits are concerned about some newspapers suing OpenAI or other firms, I don't think it's going to go very far. That's my personal opinion. And the reason for that is politics, and particularly geopolitical competition, because it's going to be for the United States that wants to compete with other large economies like China, India, and so forth. It's going to be very unviable to put a stop to the development of these models because of copyright infringements. That's my personal opinion. So I think it's not going to go very far. And I do think that there's going to be a new way that we will have to think intellectual property as well as compensating intellectual property predominantly for artists.
Walter, thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.
Ďakujeme pekne.